Jimmy on the beat, boy. Jimmy on the beat, boy. Jimmy on the beat, boy.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Gin College Podcast. I'm your host, as always, John J. II, here with Cody Almasi. Cody, how are you doing today, man?
Doing great, man. Just happy to be back on the show. Had a nice, long, extended holiday break, cruise, just family time, the holidays, all that good stuff. So excited to be back and get back in the lab, work hard, and see what 2022 brings the Gin Sports Network and all our listeners.
Yeah, Cody just went on a big trip, a big cruise, and that looked very fun. I saw pictures of that, and it looked fun. Did you trim your beard by chance?
Oh yeah, with mask mandates increasing again, had to trim it back up because it looks a little crazy popping out of those stupid masks.
Oh yeah, the COVID is rearing its ugly head again, and cases are back up. Variants are popping up out of every which crevice that you can think of. And yeah, we're really back into the thick of it. So we got to basically comply with everything that's going on as much as we can to limit the spread. But that's a whole other issue. We'll save that for another show. And I've talked about that. I already beat the hell out of it and how it's affected the sports world. Happy to announce that it's not going to be affecting the national title game tonight, which we'll talk to in detail later on in the show. But we'll talk about some, history on the matchup between Georgia and Alabama, what we have to look out for, as well as some other college football housekeeping stuff. And there's some breaking news regarding the college football playoff expansion. We'll talk about that right now for our first topic. So the college football playoff committee, the management committee, the expansion, it failed to, exceed the amount of teams that are going to be in the college football playoff, at least for right now. So it's going to stay at 4 teams. We were hoping for either an 8 or a 12 possibility. But what do you have to say about this, Cody?
Yeah, they just could not come to an agreement. Disparity about how many teams there should be is growing, and the revenue that is going to be allotted and in the bowl games, and how the expansion will affect the bowl games and their revenues for cities and teams involved. It's all, there's not really a consensus anywhere right now, and starting to get worried that we might not see anything reshaped until the 12-year contract that is currently in place expires in 2025. There's still some hope, but yeah, it's definitely dwindling, and you just really hope to see it come together. But a lot of stuff to work out, and a lot of people you got to make happy, but you can't make everybody happy, and that's the problem.
Yeah, you can't make everybody happy, but you'd think you'd be able to accommodate some more people because the want and the need, I think, is there for wanting more teams. There's teams that didn't get let into the top 4. There's teams that might not be even considered to even crest below the top 10 is, more or less a chore for a lot of teams and a lot of schools based on their schedule strength and things of that nature. Cincinnati was lucky to make it in that top 4 spot, which was beautiful to see, but there's teams that are like that. Maybe not as good as Cincinnati was, being a non-Power 5 FBS team, that want to be at that level. So having an 8 team or a 12 team, it definitely it brings more revenue into the colleges. It brings more revenue to the networks that broadcast these games. So it seems like a no-brainer because it brings more games as well to the viewers, the fans. So it seems like a no-brainer on paper, but I guess there's more that goes into it than just wanting it to happen. And there's a lot of groups of people that have to meet, have a meeting of the minds to make it a possibility and make it something that's a real thing. So I think they'll go in that direction eventually, but I just don't think it should be that much of a debate to have to agree on something where it seems like it's going in that direction anyways. What do you think?
Yeah. I'm right there with you, and it definitely means more meaningful games, less players sitting out of games, more chances for players who have a future in the sport to really showcase their talents. But as much fun as this season and the parity was, the end result here didn't really help anybody's argument. We ended up with Alabama and Georgia, 2 of the most dominant teams of the last couple of years, and Cincinnati and my Michigan Wolverines did not help in the semis. How we looked against, the good old SEC boys just looked like they usually do this time of year, dominant, and kind of made it like, hey, the best teams are going to find their way to the top no matter what every year. But yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, the SEC definitely dominates the postseason and the playoffs, which we've seen in multiple years up to this point. But I think opening up that expansion, I mean, if the teams are the best, likely the 1 seeds in each division or each region will probably get a first round bye anyways, just to have those other teams play to eventually play the 1 seeds in the semis or the whatever you want to call it, however it's structured, depending on how many teams there are. But it'll always get evened out. The proof is in the pudding, and the oil and the water will always separate as far as who deserves to be there and who gets basically weeded out of the playoffs. So I think that no matter how many teams there's going to be, it just gives more of an opportunity to the underdog to make it to that final game or to make it to the semis or, shock the world. It gives more of an opportunity for more teams to have some upsetting games for teams that, that everyone thought was a shoo-in or a lock.
And just even getting to those games and matching up with those big powerhouse teams is getting a piece of the pie. You're getting that money, that recognition, that TV time. So
Exactly. So there's a lot to consider there. Hopefully we can stay on top of this issue, and hopefully they're not done having conversations and meetings about this yet, because I would love to see an expansion before next season. It might be too ambitious. I guess it's more ambitious now, knowing what happened with the College Football Playoff Management Committee, knowing this news that just came out today, than it was, I think, originally for the rest, for pretty much this whole season. There was a pretty big want and a pretty big expectation from majority of analysts and fans that there would be an expansion, at least to an 8-team format, maybe not a 12-team. They just they might try to go up the ladder, but seeing this news, we might not even see that now. So a little bit of unfortunate news that we have to deal with, but it is what it is. So let's move on to the matchup tonight. Let's talk about the 2018 matchup between these two teams. Now, we've said this before, Kirby Smart is now 0-4 if you count the game on December 4th between Georgia and Alabama, with the SEC championship going in Alabama's favor. Kirby Smart's 0-4 against Saban. So he has a pretty, it's a pretty rough patch for him as far as wanting to beat Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide. They're a nuisance that he hasn't been able to extinguish, and that's weighing heavy on his conscience. How does this affect, the dynamic of these two teams? I think you can call this an SEC rivalry, being that they're the two top dogs in the SEC. How does this fuel the rivalry, and how does this have to do with the matchup tonight?
There's definitely a rivalry feel to it for sure. I mean, Kirby Smart was under Nick Saban as a coach for a long time with LSU, the Dolphins, and with Alabama before he got his own head coaching gig at Georgia. And yeah, 0-4 in those matchups. And yeah, the one that sticks out the most, obviously, kind of lackluster one, SEC championship. Alabama dominated just a month ago or so. But 2018, Georgia came out swinging, got up to a 13-point lead in that game. Jalen Hurts was the quarterback at first for the Crimson Tide, and we all know what happens. Tua Tagovailoa comes into the game, ends up getting them back into it, and then eventually throwing a 41-yard touchdown pass to Devonta Smith on his 2nd and 26. He evaded that sack and then just threw an absolute dime into the end zone. And the rest is history. They were the winners. And yeah, just so memorable. It's even crazy to think, that those players were there. Brian Robinson, I think he was a freshman at the time. He just was in a reserve role. But to see all these players now, that Tua Tagovailoa is now the Dolphins quarterback, and Devonta Smith won the Heisman last year when Alabama won, and is now catching passes from Jalen Hurts again, coincidentally. So it's just crazy how everything comes full circle. And here we are again, man. Should be a great matchup tonight.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it for sure. It's going to be a great matchup. And, seeing what happened on December 4th between these two teams, it really fuels the fire as far as, how pissed off can Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs get before they really come out there and show us what they're made of. We've seen the college football playoff championship in 2018 on January 8th. That went to an overtime match or overtime format, like you just mentioned, and Alabama won it by a field goal. I think that's what brings into, the conversation, the spread of minus 2.5 going down from 3. It was 3 and now it's 2.5. So seeing that field goal differential, as we know, too, that's the most common differential that we see in any college football matchup, over the course of time. So to see that matchup get changed from 3 to 2.5, that's a pretty big 0.5 of a point. That's not a small differential to really, just kind of shove to the side. You got to look at that and be like, wow, that's a big deal. That's a big amount of points, even though it's not even a point. So that has to be considered as well. So let's talk about Stetson Bennett and Bryce Young. What do we see in this matchup? Who do you think has the edge, both through the air and being able to, fake the ball and play action plays and just football IQ? Who do you think has the edge?
Oh man, it's a tough one here. It's hard not to give the nod to the Heisman winner, and especially as of late, it seems almost with every drive, Bryce Young gets a little bit smarter, a little bit more aware, a little bit more in tune with his receivers, and he just makes connections. He can expose defenses, really manipulate the secondaries, and make things happen at any given moment. And then he can make you pay with his feet as well. But Stetson Bennett, he's been kind of hiding his talents all year long. His defense and his running game he's been able to keep what he has in his arsenal under wraps a little bit, but he showcased all of them and all of it against Michigan in the semifinals. He was moving all over the place. He looked, I think an analyst referred to him as a spider or a spider monkey, something like that. He was jumping around. He was dodging Aiden Hutchinson, sneaking under arms, and just making big plays. And yeah, super mobile. And he gets the ball out of his hands so quick. And that's what makes him so tough to stop. And he can just check it down to any of his running backs. Dalvin Cook's younger brother, James Cook, he went off against the Wolverines and look for more of the same against the Wolverines. And then he just has that blanket. Brock Bowers, the tight end, the freshman all-star over there, just making plays and making people pay for trying to put running backs on him. I mean, linebackers on him. Linebackers cannot guard Brock Bowers. I'll let you know that right now. But I'm pretty sure Alabama and their defense knows that just like we do.
Yeah, it's really going to come down to the defense stopping the run, because however much you stop the run, that's just going to force each of these quarterbacks to revert to the pass game religiously, and they're going to have to go strictly to the pass game. Bryce Young is obviously a quarterback that's very evasive, but so is Stetson Bennett. We've seen that in the semis, time and time again, and throughout much of the regular season, that both these quarterbacks are evasive. They're very similar as far as their agility, what they're able to create on the field, both through the pass and if they have to run it, they will. And they'll put their bodies on the line too. They're not worried about taking a hit. We've seen that time and time again. Who's going to be the most creative against the defense that they're presented with? I think we can expect to see a different game than we saw on December 4th, just because both these teams, they've had time to study each other, and they've had time, obviously after their matchup in the SEC championship, we've been able to see them, kind of change and adapt just against the other teams that they've played just in the semis. So we've seen a different Georgia team, and I think it's fair to say we've seen a different Alabama team. You can't really compare Alabama to a Cincinnati just because I would put Michigan as far as caliber, caliber and schedule strength and just team caliber well above Cincinnati. And then to see Cincinnati play Alabama is just kind of like it's a sight to see, but it's like you don't really have too many high expectations. You want to see that upset happen. You want to see that miracle on the gridiron. But it's kind of a little bit far-fetched. I think Luke Fickell even knew that going into that game, but he wanted to give it his all, and I give them credit for taking the field and really making it to that point in their season. So you can't take anything away from Cincinnati, making it to the top 4 spot and make it to the college football playoff, especially with this limited amount of teams, the 4-team format here without the expansion happening. So got to give them credit where credit's due. But both these quarterbacks are evasive. You almost can't, cut them one way or the other, but it's hard to nod off on the Heisman winner. You got to almost give him the edge, just being able, what he's done, what he's been able to create. And the game that sticks out to me is the Iron Bowl with Alabama against Auburn, where he had to really get creative. He had to make some great passes. He had to run the ball. He had to do it all really to win that game. And that really saved their season. If they would have lost that game, they probably would have got knocked out of the top 4, even if they were Alabama. So,
and that if it comes to be a really close game towards the end, that Iron Bowl experience is going to be clutch for Bryce Young, because he had to overcome, and he was the one who made plays happen. Georgia and Stetson Bennett have never really had to play from behind at all this season. So, I mean, when they did, obviously it was to Alabama, and they weren't able to come back or do anything that resembled a comeback. So if Alabama gets out in front early, it'll be hard for the Bulldogs it'll put Stetson Bennett under a lot of pressure. And I think as far as defenses and secondaries go, I think Alabama's secondary definitely has the edge. Alabama exposed Georgia's secondary a couple times in the previous game. 2 touchdowns to Jamison Williams, 1 for 67 yards and another for 55. So if they can make those big plays happen, Georgia will be in for some trouble. We were looking at some spreads and alternate lines earlier. I think we all agreed that we really believe Alabama is going to come out victorious in this, and pretty confident about it as well. I put out a personal bet that they are going to win by 14 plus, but what we agree on in our chat?
Yeah, so we have a chat that's going on. It's underway. The first amount of picks that will be dropped on our Discord will be college picks. Going forward, obviously the chat and all the picks aren't released yet. Those will be released hopefully the week of the 15th. So coming into this weekend, going into next week, look forward to that on the Bet with Gin outlet, as well as information to join that Discord chat will be released on the website and through our social media outlets. Look out for that. But I believe Sam, my brother, actually released the pick. He put it on his story. So if you want to check that out, go ahead and do that. And I'll pull it up right now, but I believe he had the over. He pulled out some alternate spreads just to kind of, feel safe about what we've been looking at. And to do that, we have to be a little bit, and this is a game you really can't pull one way or the other. So you got to look at it objectively, consider the matchup, consider what already happened, but also look forward to what could potentially happen. So the bet that we went with is Georgia and Alabama, the over 44. So that's an alternate over spread there, where the current over under is 52.5, as you can see on the screen. And we took an alternate spread of Alabama plus 10, a little safety net there. Even if they do win, that kind of gives you a little bit of safety and security going into that. And that's minus 134 odds wise. So not too bad if you throw some coin on it. And you can get some good returns on that, and you can feel pretty good about it. Looking at the matchup that happened on December 4th and looking at the tenacity that this Alabama team has showed us, especially fighting from behind against Auburn and other teams, really to seal the win and play with tenacity and, play well in the face of adversity and do well from behind. That's what's really the key in all of this, is to be playing well and do well in behind. Keep your head, not only if you're Bryce Young, but as a team. As a team, you got to keep your head, because there's times in those games, if you watch the Iron Bowl, if you watch that to the brutal end, there was a lot of indecision. That game could have went either way, all the way up until when they were going, back and forth 2-point conversions, because they had to come out of there with a winner. And no college football game can really end in a tie, contrary to the NFL, where you only have one overtime segment. But looking at that, you got to consider the grit that Alabama shows in times of adversity. And I think that's what separates these two teams, no matter what they've been able to study, no matter what they've been able to look at, on film for the other team, formation wise, defense wise, offense wise, strategy wise. You got to look at it. Where is the grit at? Where does it come from? And it has to stick with Alabama. Does Georgia have the potential to shock the world and win this game tonight? By all means, of course they do. The bookies are obviously thinking that, looking at minus 2.5 to Georgia after losing to Alabama by a significant margin in the first game, and seeing how well Alabama's been playing against really good competitors over the course of the whole season. They have faltered in some areas. They have soft spots in their game, which has allowed them to get away with things. And, they've obviously had to fight real hard to make it back to that one spot after, acquiring that loss that they had to Texas A&M. So that's something that has to be considered, but we have to look at this objectively. We have to look at these two teams. Who do we have in front of us? Who do we see that has the most potential to win? And I got to take Alabama as well. I like the alternate spread. I might even take, on somewhat of a riskier bet, I'd say throw the over-under out the window. Maybe if you want to do that over-under of 42 and you feel a bit risky, do that. But we could see a defensive matchup here. I think we might see a defensive matchup. Go ahead and take Alabama like minus 4 or 5, so more than a field goal. But I think they win by a touchdown. And if they don't, then that bet doesn't hit. But at least you have that alternate spread bet that kind of saves your ass a little bit, makes some coin back in your pocket, because that has a pretty good potential to hit. I'd say that's pretty as much as close to a lock as you can get, as far as looking at that. And it's just who's going to score the most points, who's going to come out and perform and score for the over under. But I think there's no doubt that Alabama at least covers that 10.
Definitely.
Yeah, so there's a lot to consider here. Let us know what you guys are thinking betting wise too. Make sure to check out the article I released on the College Football National Championship game. I'll share my screen right now. That kind of talks about this in brief detail. I hope you guys have been checking out this website. A lot of great updates on here. We'll just go to the homepage, show you guys how to access the different posts that we have on here. It has all of our Instagram streams on here from the Gin Sports Network IG. As you can see here, the nail biter game between the Raiders and the Chargers last night, crazy game. This post is about Klay Thompson coming back. He played his first game last night against the Cavs. That was a big deal. His first game back on the Warriors team, hitting the hardwood for the first time in 941 days. And then obviously this one about Aaron Rodgers being active until Jordan Love came in late in the first half. And then you can see all the posts here. Go and check these out in detail. These are all from Instagram. It's fed live as posts are released. And then we have our article section down here in the GSN updates. You can sort them by category. This one is the latest one that's in question right now. And you can see who wrote it. You can see the title, and you can read a little article right here. It tells you how long the read is. Really nice format right here. And it's nice to go in here and look at what you have. And there's different tags that you can go to other articles. Once we have a better archive, a better library of articles to access, you'll be able to click these different tags and see other articles that have those tags attributed to it. So look forward to that blog section, that article section the news coming to the GSN website as the library gets more in depth and more stacked, I guess, with content. So it's going to be growing quickly. So stay on top of it. And we usually
the
post every time.
website looks great, man.
Yeah.
Can't wait
Thanks,
to
bro.
add some of my own work to it as well. Get that library built up, like you said.
Definitely. Yeah, Cody's going to be a huge help as far as adding articles and different types of content to this website too, as will others. So there's going to be some growth happening to our team going into this new year. So look forward to
I'm
that
waiting
as
for
well.
that Jim Harbaugh news to drop, man. I'm sitting here waiting to write an article on that. Just is he joining an NFL team? He's told recruits that he is entertaining offers, so it's pretty serious over here.
Jeez, that's crazy. I always thought in the back of my mind he might be looking for a way out of the Michigan head coaching spot, but I never really wanted to say that because I really like it. And me as a non-Michigan fan, I mean, I can only imagine what actual Michigan fans think about Jim Harbaugh. They just got to think. I mean, I feel like there's an overwhelmingly, there's support for Jim Harbaugh being the coach of Michigan. I guess is that accurate to assume that or no?
Yeah, I think that the majority are in favor, want him to stay. He definitely has some haters out there, but yeah, our fan base right now is in complete turmoil. They think they have an edge on what's happening, but nobody really knows anything as of yet, except for the one recruit who did leak out that it was his pastor, the recruit's pastor, actually asked Jim Harbaugh himself if he was thinking about going to the NFL. And Jim Harbaugh is just a man of God. He told the pastor the truth. So,
oh boy,
yeah. So
he knew God was listening.
We'll see what happens. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Well,
I don't know if you should confess anything to that pastor, but that's
right.
just me.
He's going to spill the beans. Well, that's the thing too. And I'm a Catholic. I'll be honest with you guys here on the podcast. I go to church every Sunday, and we have a thing called confession where you go in, you're in the closed room. It's just you and the priest, and you guys are talking in there. And he is not supposed to disclose any of that information you guys talk about. Like even if you're committing to, if you're confessing to a murder, and he has information on that, he is legally within the church and canon law is not allowed to spill the beans on anything that's talked about inside those doors. So I don't know if that's the same rule for, this pastor or whatever church is happening here, but obviously the guy spilled the beans. So, so that's public information now, but just knowing and seeing what happened in the coaching carousel thus far, seeing what happened with different coaches, the Brian Kellys, the Lincoln Rileys, seeing them jump ship to their teams that they've sworn their allegiance to just because they have better offers and more money and all these other reasons. It wouldn't surprise me to see Jim Harbaugh jump ship to an NFL team or even another college, but it seems like it would be more likely to be an NFL team than another college because I think his allegiance is too rooted in Michigan, having being an alum there and playing there and things like that. But we'll be following that as well. Hopefully he stays. I mean, he saw some success. This is probably one of the most successful Michigan teams he's ever coached.
Yep. So
he's got to be proud of that.
He thinks he might have hit that pinnacle. He's garnishing a lot of attention from the Raiders, the Bears, and today with the Brian Flores firing Stephen Ross, he's with the Dolphins and he's got that Michigan connection. So that's a lot of rumors have been fueled today that he could be also in talks with Miami. So It's going to be interesting to see what he does. And, I'm going to be right there to give you guys that scoop as soon as my phone starts blowing up.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, the coaching carousel within the NFL is a completely different beast when you're sitting here talking about it compared to college football. So that's something that we got to handle with a little bit different amount of care, and take that with a grain of salt compared to college, because I would put that the caliber of importance to a lot lower scale than I would for college, because it affects the game and the dynamic of the entire league so much more within the college landscape compared to the NFL, because you're just kind of throwing coaches in there. You can get coaches from the college world going into the NFL, and it's just like you can pick up different guys that are either inside hires or outside hires from a different team. This guy's a coordinator for the Bears. He's going to the Dolphins coach. So it's just it's a mess, and it really doesn't really require that much of attention. But when a college coach goes to the NFL, then that deserves some attention. Like the Urban Meyer going to Jacksonville, when that happened, that was a big deal. And there's a lot of people talking about that. So if anything happens with Harbaugh going to the NFL, you can count on it that we'll be talking about it. So good deal, guys. All right. closing statements time. You got anything left to say to the people before this national title game, Cody?
Yeah, just to reiterate kind of why I'm confident that Bama is going to come away with the title again, repeating back-to-backs for the second time under Nick Saban's tenure as head coach. When my Wolverines played in the semifinals, I feel like they made Georgia look better than they are. I mean, Georgia's a great team. That defense is stout. Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith, they deserve their credit. They dominated, but my Wolverines did not show up. Game plan ridiculous. The play calling got out of control early, going for it on the first drive, 4th and down. So I just really think Alabama is going to reiterate what they did in the SEC championship, and Kirby Smart's going to be 0-5 and against Saban. So you heard it here first.
Yep, I second that as well, and I'm looking for the Alabama Crimson Tide to get the title yet again, and Saban will be able to do that again and put that another notch on his belt. Even though I don't want to see that happen, I'm not going to be pissed off if Georgia wins by any means. I think it's going to be a tight game. I like Alabama plus 10 no matter what happens. It's going to be a battle. The over-under, I think, is still in question. But, if you take that alternate over of 44 or 42, whatever it was, I think it was 44, you can feel pretty good about that hitting. Because it's either going to be a defensive matchup or it's going to be a dogfight where you see, 70, 80 points get scored. So we'll see what happens, but make sure to enjoy the game, and we'll be live tweeting it throughout the game. So stay focused, stay tuned, and stay alive. And we'll be in the loop with everything. Make sure to always check out the social media outlets that we have at the bottom of your screen on the link tree. Always stay in tune with the website. A lot of articles are being posted. Different content is being available to you guys every single day on that website. So stay in touch with it and put it in your bookmarks. You guys can always check that out on a daily basis. But I'll leave it at that, guys. Thanks again for tuning in to the Gin College Podcast. I'm your host, as always, John J. II with Cody Almasi. Have a great night.